Welcome to section 8.1. This is inverse and joint variation, although we are going to throw direct variation in again from chapter 1 just to make sure that we remember chapter 1. So let's start there. Direct variation, we gave you the equation in chapter 1 that says y equals a times x. And so direct variation is talking about the multiplication of a constant which we call a. Now, there are a couple of ways that you saw it in chapter 1 as we worded a question. The first way we said is the variables x and y vary directly. That was the first wording that you saw in chapter 1, and that told us then to use the equation y equals ax. The second way you saw it was y varies directly with x. Okay, so those are two ways that you at least saw a question worded that talked about direct variation. So I want to walk back to chapter 1 for a minute and talk about how to set this up. Okay, so in number 1, the variables x and y vary directly. That means we are starting with the general equation y equals a times x. Now we tell you x equals 4 and y equals 10. The reason we give you those numbers is to find the value of that constant a. So I'm going to stick in what I know. Y is 10 times a equals a times 4. When I divide by 4, a equals, now I'm going to reduce my fraction because 10 divided by 4 is the same thing as 5 divided by 2. Now it says, now that I found my constant, it says now write an equation with x and y. That means go back to y equals, and instead of the a, put 5 halves. So 5 over 2 times x. This is our equation. Okay, so that gets us back into a little bit of direct variation. Let's do a general one. T varies directly with u. Write an equation. Well, if I say t varies directly, so varies directly with u is how you kind of write it as you go through. T varies directly with u. And I try to find like each word gives us a specific thing. So that's just giving you, again, a general idea of what we did in chapter 1 with direct variation. Let's go now to chapter 8 as we look at inverse variation. Direct was when we multiplied a times x. Inverse is where we divide a by x. Okay? So direct variation is the multiplication. Inverse variation is the division. Okay, so what ways is your book going to write this in words? Well, I'm going to kind of go the same way as I did with direct. They are going to give you this. The variables x and y vary, instead of directly this time, they're going to say vary inversely. And that just means there's a division with them. The second way, I'm going to follow the same as last one. Y varies inversely with x. Okay? So that's the idea as we're going through. It's the wording that we want you to look for. So let's do the same idea we did in number 1. Let's try it with an inverse variation now in number 3. So the variables x and y vary inversely. That means we start with y equals a over x. They tell us y is 3 and x is 6. So y is 3 and we divide a by 6. Now let's solve to find a. So I multiply by 6 on both sides. And 6 times 3 is 18, so a is 18. Now that's only getting us a. They now want an equation with x and y. So we go back to write our equation. Y equals 18 over x. And all of these need to come back to a y equals equation or some sort of equation with your variables back in it. Let's try one more general. X varies inversely. Now they started with x this time. X varies inversely. That means a over something. The cube of y means you take y cubed. This one's a little different one, and I put that one on there because there is going to be times when we start throwing our exponents back at you again. If they say varies inversely, then, you know, they start with a variable, then that's the variable that you start with in your equation. If they say the two variables together, then you always start with the y equals. Okay, so we're looking now at, we've seen inverse and direct. Now I'm going to go to joint, and I'm just going to slide this really quick, and I'll bring that stuff back up. But I just want to slide this out of the way so that we can look at joint. Joint variation means we're doing multiple multiplications. So I'm going to give you an equation that says z equals a times x times y. So now we're multiplying different variables as we go through. So joint variation, joint means more than one, we're combining. So we're combining some multiplication. Okay, so again, two ways to read it. The first way, the variables x, y, and z vary jointly. Okay, and that's one way you're going to see it. And if the variables come together, you always go with the last variable is what it equals to. So it's equal to z. Or they're going to say z varies jointly with x and y. Okay, z varies jointly with x and y. They'll give it to you both ways, but again, I want you to kind of see that up front. So here we go. Z varies jointly with x and y. Okay, 5 says z equals a times x times y. If z is negative 84, when x is negative 4 and y is 3, write an equation. All right, well, negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Because this is all multiplication, to get rid of multiplication, we divide by negative 12. That cancels this stuff. So negative 84 divided by negative 12, I know then that a is 7. Now, that only gives us our a value. Now it says write an equation. So z equals 7 times x times y. Again, you're coming back to the variables that they give you in the original equation. And this one's a little bit different. Okay? 6, I'm going to try and mix all of this together. K varies jointly with x and y. That means as I do this, k varies. Jointly means I multiply them, so a times x times y. And inversely means divide by m. And I put this together because, again, I'm going to sometimes mix these up as we go through, and we're going to do quite a bit of work. So I wanted you to see at least a mixture of this. And so this is the first part, and the first part is really just what is all of this talking about. Okay? Now what we're going to do now is move to the back side and see if we can actually do some problems. Okay, take a look. We are going to try and tell you what type of variation it is by the equation that they give you. Now, I don't have anything written here, so let me give you a couple of things. Let's start with example 1. I'm going to give you the equation xy equals 5. Now, I'm not going to be able to tell what type of variation it is until I get to a y equals. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to start xy equals 5. And when I divide by x, because I want a y equals equation, I get 5 divided by x. Now, as I look at this, is it direct, where I multiply, inverse, where I divide, or joint, where I have multiple multiplications? In this case, this is an inverse variation, okay, because I have the division. All right, let's do another one. Let's call this example 2. I'm going to give you p divided by q equals 92. And I'm going to just try solving for one variable, so let's get the p by itself. So I'm going to rewrite this. P divided by q equals 92, and I'm going to multiply both sides by q. So I have p equals 92 times q. Now, because again I have multiplication, this is a direct variation. Okay? If you have the multiplication, it's direct. If you have the division, it's an inverse. All right, let's try one more. Y equals 2 times x plus 4. Now, is it already solved for one variable? The answer is yes. So I don't really need to rewrite it. This is the equation I have. Now, is there just multiplication or just division? The answer is no. This is neither inverse nor direct because of this addition. And so I'll just put a note. There is addition. You cannot have addition or subtraction in this section if you want it to be an inverse or a direct variation. So because there is addition, this is neither inverse nor direct. Okay? Now, as we go through, let me slide this up actually just a little bit. And I'm going to X out what we had there, but we're going to use data to determine whether an equation, whether the set of data is an inverse or direct variation. So let me give you some hints. If I want to see if it's direct, okay, to see if my data is direct, direct means that there was multiplication. So in order to see if it was direct, we have to divide the variables and find that it's constant. And what I mean by constant is it's going to be the same number when I divide y by x. So because this is multiplication for direct, you have to check the division to make sure that everything gets you the same answer. To see if it's inverse, which inverse means divide, you're going to do the opposite and see if their multiplication is constant, okay, is the same number. And so it's opposite of what you think. If it's direct, then you check the division. If it's inverse, then you check the multiplication. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look, and I'm going to try, I always try the multiplication first because I think it's easier. So if I do 5 times 45, I get 225. If I take 10 times 22.5, I get 225. Hey, that's a good thing because these two are the same. Now I would keep checking for each of the other things, but what you're going to end up finding is that you get 225 every single time. Because I get to multiply, then my answer is the opposite. It's division, which means I have an inverse variation. Okay? And in order to figure out what the equation is, this number that we find they have in common, this constant number is going to be our A. So when I write my equation, I'm going to use the m and the n's. This is like the x and the y's. So I'm going to say n equals, because it's the second one, 225 over m, because m was the first number in our table. So it's like an x and a y. Where normally you say y equals a over x. In this case, it's n and m. Okay? The second thing is, find when m is 45, what is n? Well, okay, if I look at this, and let me change my color because I'm kind of getting a little crowded here so you can kind of see. When is m 45? I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug it in the equation. So I'm going to say, okay, 225 divided by 45, then I can tell you then that n is 5. And that's what should go up in this blank, but again, I've got that box there for right now. So 1, find the type. 2, give me the equation. 3, use the equation as we go through. All right? That's the first one. Second one, let's try. I'm going to try multiplication first. So 4 times 16, 64. Okay? 5 times 11 is 55. Can it be the multiplication? Nope, not going to work. So we try dividing. 16 divided by 4 is 4. 11 divided by 5 is not 4. Okay, so because these aren't the same, it's neither multiplication nor division, so we say neither. Because I say neither, I don't have to worry about these two. But again, you want to check both, and I think the multiplication is easier, so I always check that first. If that doesn't work, I go to the division and say, nope, that's not going to work either. So that's the idea of direct and inverse and joint variation. as we go through. Again, you will want to make sure that when you are done, you write your equation with the variables of your original description. So be careful there.